Hello, this is Mr. Smith, and this is Honors Economics. Today we'll be talking about the labor market. And the labor market is a little bit different than other marketplaces. When we're talking about, for instance, the apple market, there is a market for apples. So there is a supply of apples from all the apple orchards, and then there is the demand for people that want to purchase apples. And whenever we have an equilibrium point where these two lines intersect, that is the best place for price and quantity. And then, of course, we have a consumer surplus and a producer surplus. But that's different than the market for apple pickers, the people that are actually working in the apple producing industry. And so we have a supply of the people who want to work as apple pickers. And so in the marketplace, we're looking at the businesses, the actual orchards. Here, we're looking at the people that are supplying the labor. So the people or households are the ones that supply this factor of production. The demand comes from the businesses. So it's the orchards that are demanding the labor. They're the ones purchasing the labor from the apple pickers. And wherever the best price is, or the efficiency is where the equilibrium occurs, where there's an intersection between the two curves. And this is where we have the equilibrium wage and the equilibrium labor, or the quantity of labor that's going to occur. And so once again, we still have a consumer surplus, but remember, in this case, the consumer is the employer. The employers have saved all this possible money. They could have paid a wage higher than this, but they didn't, so this is their surplus. And for the apple pickers, they are the ones that are producing the labor, so this is their surplus, and it is this area because at all the points lower than equilibrium, they could have gotten a lesser wage, but here it is higher. So this is the surplus area in the marketplace for apple pickers, the actual labor that occurs. So these are two different things. This is the market for apples. This is for the laborers. And that's important to remember. The wage is determined by the production function. And we can map this out similar to how we had the production costs in earlier activities. And it is when we have a table basically where we list the number of workers and the output in a certain given time. So that all sounds familiar. But then we have the marginal product of labor, which is, of course, the change in quantity divided by the change in labor. So if we have 10 workers and they're producing 100 bushels, and then we have 11 workers and they're producing 115 bushels, that's a change of 15. So the change in quantity divided by the number of workers, that went up by 1, we had 15 additional bushels. So 15 divided by 1 is 15. So that's the marginal product of labor. And the value of the marginal product of labor, let me just change the sides there, for the VMPL, the value of the marginal product labor, so how much is that increase in production worth? And we estimate that by this formula here. So you can see VMPL is the value of marginal product, and that is the marginal product of the input multiplied by the market price of the output. So MPL, as you can see, VMPL equals MPL, which is a marginal product of input, which is that change that happens, times the price of the market output. That is also what would be the efficient wage. So to maximize profits, the competitive profit maximizing firm will hire workers up to the point where the value of the marginal product equals the wage. And so they'll know when that marginal product gets, let's say the wage is 20, when the marginal product of labor gets to that point, 20, they know that's when, of course, they shouldn't hire any more employees. So they should hire up to that point. Quantity of apples is on the vertical axis. The quantity of apple pickers is on the horizontal axis. So we can see that we're increasing the number of apple pickers and then increasing the quantity of apples. Eventually, this is going to level off, and at a point where we're not increasing as much as we did in previous steps, that's diminishing marginal returns, and eventually this will become negative and become negative marginal returns. So there's a point where they have to stop picking of the apples. And the value of the marginal product of labor is also the demand curve for labor. So this is what they want out of the marketplace. And then, of course, the supply is how many people are willing to work at each of those wages. We can then also have shifts in the supply and demand of labor. And here you can see a shift marked out, the supply of labor. Perhaps apple picking becomes dangerous because now there's grizzly bears now have a hunger for apples, and so they're swarming around all the apple orchards. It's a dangerous job, so the supply of people willing to pick apples drops. And then the wage will, of course, increase, as you can see. The wage will go up. So lots of things can change both supply and demand. The output price, the technological changes that can occur, the supply of other factors, the danger of the working environment, the uncomfortability of it, the utility of it, the training or education that is necessary. And so, for instance, maybe, doctors, anybody could just say, for instance, especially in the Old West, they would take the title doctor and they would also practice dentistry and be a barber and all kinds of other stuff, but maybe there was no certification in the territory or new state. But once they get that set up and they advocate for certification that you actually have to attend university to become a medical doctor, then the supply of people willing to be doctors goes down and the wages go up. A job is dangerous. A job takes a lot of natural talent, being a professional athlete or actor or musician, so the supply is going to be lower. So the wage is going to be higher. So it really just relates to whatever the supply and demand of labor are. So using the professional athletes and musicians and other entertainers as an example, is their job particularly hard? Well, it can be, but is it harder than being a farmer or a steel worker? Probably not. Is it more dangerous than being a farmer or a steel worker or a coal miner? Probably not. Those activities, though, we need coal for energy production, we need steel in order to build things, we need farmers in order to feed ourselves. So those are essential, whereas professional athletes, musicians, actors, and so on, well, people could just go to their community theater if they wanted to be entertained. They can go look at a local sports league if they want to be entertained. They don't have to have these other things. So it's not that their jobs are essential because they get a high wage. It's not that their jobs are any more dangerous than others because they have a high wage. It's not that their job is harder to do than other jobs. That's not why they have a higher wage. It's because there's not a lot of people with that talent, and there's a high demand to watch people of those talents. And so that's why they have a high wage. So when people say they're getting paid based on how hard their job is, and how much training there is, and all that's true, that decreases the supply of labor, but really those are the two variables that matter the most, the supply and the demand of labor.